I walked into my basement, a damp, shadowed concrete cavern that had always smelled faintly of old copper wires, dust, and ozone. The house above me was dead silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that had recently taken up permanent residence in our home, sitting at our dinner table like an uninvited, hostile guest. The ancient grandfather clock in the hallway ticked with a relentless, punishing rhythm. Each beat felt like a tiny hammer against my chest, a constant, mocking reminder that the 40 years of marriage I had so carefully nurtured might actually be a beautifully constructed, monstrous lie. I was looking for a spare fuse because the kitchen overhead lights had flickered and died an hour ago. But as I reached behind the rusted metal frame of the old water heater, my hand brushed against something cold, heavy, and completely out of place. I pulled my hand back, frowning. I turned on my phone's flashlight, casting a harsh, white beam into the narrow gap. There, tucked away as if it were a dirty secret, sat a brand new high-end, commercial car battery. It was professional grade, the kind used for heavy-duty security systems or industrial machinery. Attached to its terminals were dual-insulated copper cables, neatly coiled and waiting. I didn't say a single word. I didn't scream, and I didn't run upstairs to demand answers. A strange, freezing calm washed over me. A survival instinct that takes over a woman when she realizes the ground beneath her feet is turning to ash. I gently pushed the battery back into its hiding place, my mind instantly putting together a terrifying puzzle. My husband, Marcus, was a master electrician, a highly respected contractor who prided himself on being the man the city called when the municipal power grids suffered critical failures at midnight. For 15 years, I had played the role of the supportive, trusting wife. I had warmed up his dinners at 3 a.m., washed the heavy grease and soot from his canvas overalls, and never once questioned why his emergency always seemed to happen on Friday and Saturday nights. I had built his business from the ground up, managing his invoices, balancing his books, and typing his corporate contracts while he worked out in the field. But over the past 6 months, Marcus had changed. He no longer looked me in the eye when he handed me his car keys. His smooth, rehearsed explanations about blown transformers and short-circuited commercial buildings felt like a script he had practiced in his truck before walking through the front door. And then there was the smell. He no longer returned home smelling of industrial sweat, burning wires, or metallic dust. Instead, he carried a faint, alien fragrance, a sweet, overwhelming scent of French lavender. It was a luxury perfume that I had never purchased, a scent that felt like an aggressive intrusion into the quiet sanctuary of our bedroom, a brazen confession written in the air. That evening, Marcus had collapsed onto the living room sofa, claiming a grueling 12-hour shift at a data center had completely drained him. He hadn't even bothered to take a shower or change out of his professional gear. Within minutes, the heavy rhythmic drone of his snoring filled the house. Once, that sound had brought me a deep sense of security, a sign that my protector was home and safe. Tonight, it sounded like a mocking lullaby. A lullaby meant for a blind, trusting fool. As he slept, his corporate tablet sat on the coffee table beside his empty coffee mug. The screen suddenly lit up with a soft, blue glow, cutting through the darkness of the living room like a sinister omen. I stood over him, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Marcus always told me, Elena, you know I can't stand digital gadgets. I'm an old-school technician. Just leave the tablet in my briefcase. I only use it for official client signatures. but the notification currently flashing on the screen was anything but official. It was an incoming message from a private account. Out of a morbid, desperate curiosity that felt both terrifying and absolutely necessary. I stepped closer, moving with the silent, practiced grace of a wife who had spent decades maintaining peace in a quiet house. I tapped the screen. The preview opened, revealing a short message that would instantly shatter my entire reality into 1,000 jagged pieces. Thanks for fixing my wiring last night, boss. The currents were absolutely wild. Can't wait for our next private project this weekend. The text was followed by a series of red hearts and a highly suggestive emoji. I froze, the breath leaving my lungs as if I had been struck by a physical blow. The sender's name displayed at the top of the screen made my stomach violently churn. Chloe. Chloe was Marcus's 24-year-old administrative assistant. A girl we had hired fresh out of community college. But she wasn't just an employee. Chloe was my younger sister's childhood best friend. She was someone I had welcomed into this very house for Thanksgiving dinners. A girl I had baked pies for. Someone I had comforted when she cried about her financial struggles. Marcus had offered her the job out of pure family charity. I stood there in the dim light of the living room, staring at the screen as the digital world reflected a truth I had been too terrified to see. My hands shook so violently that I had to place them flat on the kitchen table to steady myself. I looked back at Marcus. He turned over on the sofa, letting out a sputtering snore. His face completely peaceful and still. The contrast between his calm demeanor and the violent storm raging inside my soul was infuriating. My grief, heavy and suffocating at first, began to crystallize. The tears that burned my eyes didn't fall. Instead, they evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard, unyielding desire for total exposure. The next morning arrived with a gray, lifeless dawn. The sun filtered through the kitchen curtains, casting long, pale shadows across the room. I was already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of strong black coffee that had gone completely cold. I hadn't slept a single second. My mind had spent the night replaying every interaction, every late-night phone call, and every sudden business trip Marcus had taken over the past year. When Marcus came downstairs, he looked groggy, his hair disheveled. But his professional facade was instantly activated the moment he saw me. He walked over, gave me a light, mechanical pat on the shoulder, a cold gesture that felt more like an afterthought than a sign of affection, and grabbed his car keys from the counter. I have an exceptionally large commercial grid inspection downtown today. Elena, he said, his voice husky, using that same rehearsed, casual tone he had perfected over the months. He didn't look me in the eyes. He kept his gaze focused on his watch. The corporate offices are having massive power issues. I'm certain I'll be home very late tonight, so don't wait up for me. Get some rest. Of course, Marcus, I replied, forcing a soft, supportive smile to my lips, though my throat felt tight enough to strangle me. Where is the inspection? I wanted to scream. Which office building is it, Marcus? Or are you going to Chloe's apartment to check on her private wiring again? But I held back the fire burning in my chest. I knew that if I confronted him now, he would lie, manipulate the data, delete the messages, and paint me as a paranoid, hysterical wife who was losing her mind. I needed undeniable, absolute proof. Be careful out there. Make sure the main breakers are off before you touch anything. I added, my voice smooth and perfectly controlled. Always am, honey, he muttered before shutting the heavy oak front door behind him. The sound of his diesel truck fading down the driveway left the house in a profound, heavy silence. The moment his truck turned the corner, I went straight to work. I carried his dirty work clothes from the laundry basket upstairs to our master bedroom. Marcus was meticulous about his tools, but when it came to his personal effects, he was incredibly careless, relying entirely on the assumption that I would blindly clean up after him without looking. I checked his canvas pant pockets. In the small, inner coin pocket, my fingers brushed against a crisp, tightly folded piece of paper. I pulled it out and smoothed it out on the bed. It was a premium receipt from a luxury boutique hotel and spa located in San Antonio, dated just 3 nights ago, a night he had explicitly told me he was stranded at a municipal substation in North Dallas due to a severe lightning storm. I stared at the receipt, a bitter, breathless laugh escaping my lips. Marcus hated driving to Dallas, always complaining about the traffic. San Antonio, however, was a city he loved. A place where his late mother had owned a small cottage. A place filled with fond childhood memories. But he hadn't gone there to remember his mother. The receipt showed a reservation for a luxury suite with an in-room jacuzzi, a complimentary bottle of expensive champagne, and a room service order for a party of 2. The total amount was nearly $2,000 paid entirely in cash. Marcus was using the cash generated from his cash Unily residential repair jobs. Money that never entered our shared corporate bank accounts. Money he kept hidden away from my oversight. A deep, existential dread gripped my stomach. I felt like I was standing on the absolute edge of a massive cliff, watching the spectacular, catastrophic collapse of my 40-year life. But my survival instincts kept my head crystal clear. I took out my phone, snapped a perfectly clear, high-resolution photo of the hotel receipt, and folded it back exactly the way I had found it, placing it back into his pocket. Next, I went into the walk-in closet of our master bedroom. In the furthest, darkest corner, hidden behind his rows of winter coats, sat a heavy, digital steel safe. Marcus had installed it 5 years ago, claiming it was for storing official business deeds, titled documents, and spare electrical components that were too expensive to leave in his truck. I had never asked for the combination, trusting him completely. But I knew him better than he knew himself. Marcus was a man of rigid habits. He used the same sequential numbers for his tool lockboxes, his truck's security code, and his first commercial license number. With trembling fingers, I entered the sequence. Into the digital keypad of the safe, click, the heavy mechanism unlocked, and the steel door swung open with a soft, metallic groan. Inside, there were no corporate deeds or legal titles. Instead, there was a stack of legal documents and folders. I opened the top folder. It contained a newly drafted, confidential property deed. Marcus had purchased a luxury, modern condo downtown, and the deed was co-signed under 2 names, Marcus Roberts and Chloe Vance. Beneath the property papers sat stacks of $100 bills, bundled neatly with rubber bands. There was easily over $150,000 in hidden currency sitting in that safe. He was systematically bleeding our business dry, pocketing the cash from our loyal residential clients, and using it to build a completely separate, secret life with a girl young enough to be his daughter. Right beside the stacks of cash sat a small, leather-bound notebook. I opened it. It was a handwritten log of dates, times, and financial amounts, money spent on luxury dinners, diamond jewelry, and European vacation bookings for the upcoming month. But the final item in the safe was what truly turned my blood to ice. It was a printed airline ticket confirmation for a one-way flight to Paris, scheduled for the end of the month, under Marcus's name and Chloe's name. He wasn't just having a temporary affair. He was planning to completely abandon me, liquidate our remaining business assets, and disappear, leaving me with a bankrupt company and a mountain of unpaid commercial taxes. My heart pounded so hard I could hear the roar of blood in my ears. I took high-resolution photos of every single document, every bundle of cash, the property deed, and the airline tickets. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped my phone twice. But I forced myself to remain methodical, robotic, and completely silent. I closed the safe, locked it, and stepped out of the closet, a cold, unyielding rage solidifying in my chest. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. I needed independent, legally binding evidence that could stand up in a court of law. Proof that his high-priced corporate defense attorneys couldn't manipulate or dispute. I sat in the kitchen of my small, home-based bakery office, the familiar, comforting scent of vanilla, flour, and fresh yeast surrounding me. Usually, this room brought me absolute peace, but today, it felt hollow. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of Mrs. Miller, a lifelong friend who had stood by me when I first opened my business decades ago. Years prior, during a casual conversation about a neighborhood scandal, she had mentioned a highly discreet, ruthlessly efficient private investigator who specialized in high-stakes corporate and marital infidelity cases. Juliet, if you ever find yourself in a dark corner where you need the absolute, unvarnished truth, you call Thomas. She had told me back then. He doesn't play games, he doesn't leak data, and he sees through every lie. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. "Hello, Mrs. Miller," I said, my voice tight and raw, my pride bruised to the bone. "I need Thomas's contact information. I need him immediately." There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line, a silence that spoke volumes. Mrs. Miller was a woman of immense intuition. She didn't ask a million frantic questions. She simply sighed softly and said, "I'll text you his secure number right now, Elena. Stay strong. Don't confront him until you have the heavy iron in your hands." An hour later, I received a encrypted text message from Thomas, asking me to meet him at noon at a small, secluded cafe downtown, a quiet place with worn wooden tables and the heavy aroma of roasted coffee beans. I chose a dark, corner booth near the back exit, blending into the shadows. Thomas walked in exactly at noon. He was a middle-aged man, stocky, with sharp, philosophical gray eyes that seemed to read the entire room in a single glance. He wore a simple, unpretentious blue shirt, looking completely ordinary. The perfect disguise for a man whose job was to remain invisible. "This is my husband, Marcus Roberts," I whispered, the words tasting like bitter ash in my mouth. "I believe he is systematically embezzling our corporate funds and using them to maintain a secret relationship with his assistant. I need to know every single detail. I need the hard evidence." Thomas reviewed the images on his encrypted mobile device, his face completely expressionless, a mask of professional detachment. He made a few rapid notes in a small leather notebook, then looked up at me with a gaze full of quiet compassion. "Mrs. Roberts, I understand completely," Thomas said, his voice low and steady. "I will begin active surveillance on your husband starting this afternoon. Do not alter your daily schedule. Do not change your tone of voice. Do not lock your bedroom doors. And under no circumstances show him that you are suspicious. Let him believe he is the smartest man in the room. That is always when they make their most fatal mistakes." The next 48 hours were a slow, agonizing descent into hell. I stayed at my bakery, forcing myself to interact with clients, pack orders of sweet pastries, and sign delivery invoices while my entire world was being dismantled in the shadows. On the second night, around 11:30 p.m., my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. It was a secure link from Thomas. My hands trembled as I entered the password and opened the file. A series of high-definition photographs flashed onto my screen. The first image showed Marcus entering a luxury, dim-lit seafood restaurant downtown. He was wearing his favorite, custom-tailored blue shirt, the one I had bought him for our last anniversary. His arm was wrapped tightly around Chloe's waist. Chloe was wearing a tight, expensive black designer dress, her makeup heavy. Her lips painted a striking, intense red. Thomas had captured them, sitting in a secluded, candlelit alcove of the restaurant. They looked like a passionate high-society couple on a luxurious date. They didn't look like an employer and an assistant discussing corporate logistics. In one photo, Chloe was leaning across the table, her eyes sparkling with laughter, while Marcus toasted her glass of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon with a look of intense, genuine adoration, a look of deep, proud love that I hadn't seen directed at me in over 25 years. I sank into my office chair, clutching the edge of the desk as a wave of physical nausea washed over me. I remembered the early days of our marriage, when we had nothing but a broken-down truck and a dream. I remembered Marcus carrying heavy sacks of flour into my first tiny bakery kitchen, laughing as white dust covered his face, promising me that we would conquer the world together. That memory was now a corpse, a beautiful illusion designed to keep me compliant while he prepared his escape. Then, a short video file arrived from Thomas. The timestamp read 1:45 a.m. I quickly plugged in my headphones, desperate to keep the audio from echoing into the empty bakery. The video showed Marcus and Chloe leaving the restaurant, holding hands openly. They walked over to his luxury diesel truck. Marcus, ever the perfect gentleman, opened the passenger door for her, lifting her up gently before closing it. But instead of driving toward her apartment, the truck pulled into the underground parking structure of the four-star, glass-fronted hotel near the plaza. The next clip showed them on the third-floor balcony of a luxury suite. The ambient city lights illuminated them perfectly. Marcus was standing behind her, his arms wrapped around her chest, while she rested her head back against his shoulder, her long hair moving softly in the night wind. Then, they turned toward each other and shared a long, deeply intimate kiss. A final text message from Thomas popped up below the video. They have checked into the penthouse suite under a cash alias. My operative confirms they have reservations there for the entire weekend. I am maintaining surveillance from the perimeter. I stared at the screen, my throat tight, a cold, hard stone of pure rage permanently settling in my chest. Just 3 hours ago, Marcus had sent me a text message. Elena, the main breaker at the downtown substation just exploded. It's a total disaster area. I'm going to be stuck here working with the municipal crew all night. Please don't stay up. Get some good rest, honey. Love you. The easy, effortless nature of his deception was what terrified me the most. He could look me in the eye, tap a sweet message on his phone, and then turn around to embrace my sister's best friend in a hotel room paid for with my company's stolen cash. The time for sorrow was officially over. The traitors had written their script, but I was going to design the final act. The next morning, Marcus returned home at 7 a.m. looking performatively exhausted. His shirt slightly wrinkled, his face a map of manufactured fatigue. He gave me a brief, tired nod as he walked past the kitchen, murmuring something about needing a long shower before heading to the office to complete the substation paperwork. The moment the bathroom door clicked shut, and the sound of running water filled the upstairs hallway, I moved with absolute precision. I walked down into the dark basement, carrying a pair of heavy, rubber-insulated industrial wire cutters, an electrical tester, and a small, unmarked tube of industrial-grade superglue, a specialized cyanoacrylate bonding agent used in heavy construction that sets instantly and can withstand thousands of pounds of pressure. I pulled the brand new commercial car battery out from behind the water heater. I knew exactly what Marcus was planning to use it for. He was going to use his emergency call-out schedule this upcoming Friday night to secretly strip the copper and valuable wiring from our company's main storage warehouse, load it into his truck, and use this battery to bypass the warehouse's digital alarm system before fleeing the country. But I also knew his daily personal habits. In the glove compartment of his luxury diesel truck, Marcus kept a specific, small plastic tube of personal lubricant. He had been using the excuse of dry skin and industrial chafing from his heavy leather tool belts to keep it there, but I now knew its real, disgusting purpose for his afternoon visits to the downtown condo with Chloe. I walked out to his truck, parked innocently in the driveway. The interior still carried that faint, sickening scent of French lavender. I opened the passenger side glove compartment. My fingers brushed against the slippery plastic tube. I pulled it out, unscrewed the cap, and used a small syringe to completely drain the clear lubricant from the container. Using a steady, unblinking hand, I filled the empty tube with the industrial. The chemical consistency was nearly identical clear, slightly viscous, but incredibly deadly upon contact with skin. I carefully wiped the edges of the plastic cap with a solvent napkin, ensuring there was absolutely no residue left on the outside that could alert his fingers. I placed the tube back into the exact corner of the glove box, adjusting the loose change and the empty water bottles around it so it looked completely undisturbed. But I wasn't done. I returned to the master bedroom's walk-in closet. I stared at the heavy metal handle of the closet door. This closet was where Marcus kept his private safe, his expensive custom suits, and his passport. I knew that before he left for his final trip with Chloe on Friday night, he would spend hours in this closet, packing his luxury items and retrieving the $150,000 in cash from the safe. Using the advanced electrical engineering skills I had learned from decades of managing his corporate wirings, I opened the electrical outlet panel located inside the closet wall. I ran a pair of ultra-thin, highly insulated copper cables from the main 220-volt household breaker line behind the drywall, routing them directly into the heavy metallic mechanism of the closet door handle. I installed a compact, wireless smart relay switch into the tiny device that allowed me to activate or deactivate the electrical current, flowing into the door handle directly from an app on my personal phone. When the switch was turned off, the handle was completely safe to touch. But the moment I tapped the red button on my screen, the metallic handle would become live, charged with a continuous, high-voltage electrical current that would instantly cause a phenomenon known as muscle tetany, a state where a person's hand muscles contract so violently upon touching the current that they become physically incapable of letting go of the object. They are effectively locked in place, trapped by their own neurological impulses. I tested the voltage output using my digital multimeter, ensuring the current was highly painful and completely immobilizing, but not fatal. I wanted him alive. I wanted him conscious. I wanted him to witness every single second of his own spectacular undoing. I neatly patched the drywall, replaced the metal faceplate of the outlet, and stepped back. The closet looked completely normal. An ordinary room holding an extraordinary high-voltage trap. The stage was set, the components were wired, and the countdown had officially begun. Friday night arrived with a violent, torrential rainstorm that battered against the windows of the house, the wind howling through the trees like a chorus of angry spirits. It was the perfect weather for a betrayal. Marcus came home at 6 p.m. His energy high, an undercurrent of nervous excitement radiating from him. He kept checking his watch every 2 minutes. He didn't even sit down at the dinner table. Elena, a massive power failure, just hit the industrial chemical plant on the edge of the county line, he announced, his voice tight, his eyes darting around the room as he adjusted his heavy leather jacket. The entire facility is offline. It's an all-hands-on-deck emergency. I've already called Chloe to handle the corporate logistics from the office. I'll be gone all night, and I might have to drive straight to the central supply warehouse in the morning. Don't wait up for me. I understand completely. Marcus, I said, my voice a calm, soothing melody that betrayed absolutely none of the freezing iron in my soul. I stood by the kitchen counter, holding my phone tightly in my apron pocket. Take your time. Do what you have to do. Thanks, honey. You're the best, he muttered, giving me a quick, distracted kiss on the cheek, a cold, breathless kiss that tasted like poison. He turned and ran upstairs to the master bedroom to pack his final briefcase and retrieve his hidden cash from the safe. The moment his heavy boots cleared the top step, I took my phone out of my pocket, opened the Smart Relay app, and tapped the red button. The circuit was live. Upstairs, Marcus walked into the walk-in closet. He reached out and grabbed the heavy metal door handle. Instantly, a deafening, terrifying scream tore through the second floor of the house, a high-pitched shriek of absolute agony and sheer terror. The 220-volt electrical current surged through his hand, instantly locking his fingers around the metal handle in a vice-like grip. His muscles contracted completely, trapping him in place. He couldn't pull his hand away. He couldn't drop his briefcase. And he couldn't move his body. He was completely pinned against the closet door, his entire frame vibrating violently from the continuous, high-frequency voltage. At that exact microsecond, down in the driveway, Chloe was waiting for him in the passenger seat of his diesel truck. Having secretly arrived early to help him load the stolen corporate copper, she heard his screams echoing through the open bedroom window. Panicking, her heart racing, she threw open the truck's glove compartment, desperately looking for a flashlight or a tool to help him. Instead, her eyes fell upon the tube of personal lubricant. In her frantic, chaotic state of mind, thinking Marcus was suffering an industrial injury or a severe burn from a component, she snatched the tube, unscrewed the cap with her teeth, and poured a massive amount of the clear fluid directly into her hands, planning to run upstairs and use it to lubricate a trapped mechanism, or help free him from a tight space. But the fluid wasn't lubricant. It was industrial-grade superglue. The moment she pressed her hands together to rub the liquid, the chemical compound reacted with the moisture on her skin. Within 3 seconds, her palms were chemically welded together with a bond stronger than steel. She let out a sharp gasp of confusion, trying to pull her hands apart, but it was too late. Her fingers were fused together in a permanent, agonizing position. In her blind panic, she accidentally wiped her sticky, glue-covered hand across her face, instantly bonding her hand directly to her jaw and lips. She began to choke, letting out muffled, terrified screams through her partially sealed mouth. Trapped inside the cabin of the diesel truck, upstairs, Marcus was still screaming, his voice growing hoarse, the continuous electrical current rendering him completely helpless. The extreme voltage began to heat up the old wiring inside the drywall. A sharp smell of burning plastic and acrid gray smoke began to pour from the outlet panel. The overloaded circuit sparked violently, igniting a row of Marcus's expensive winter coats hanging inside the closet. Within minutes, a bright, roaring fire broke out inside the closet, the flames licking against the ceiling. The neighbors across the street, hearing the relentless, terrifying screams echoing from our house and seeing thick, black smoke beginning to pour from our master bedroom window, instantly realized something catastrophic was happening. They pulled out their phones and made an emergency call directly to the fire department and the police, reporting a massive structural fire and a severe domestic crisis. Within 7 minutes, the quiet neighborhood was completely transformed into a chaotic scene of flashing lights, roaring sirens, and blaring horns. 2 massive red fire engines, 3 police cruisers, and a high-speed ambulance tore down the street, their sirens cutting through the heavy rainstorm. Neighbors ran out onto their porches, staring in absolute shock as the emergency response units deployed across our front lawn. I stood calmly on the front porch, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, holding a warm cup of coffee, looking completely unbothered by the unfolding disaster. The fire chief ran up the steps, his heavy boots slamming against the wood. "Ma'am, we have reports of a structural fire on the 2nd floor and multiple victims screaming. You need to evacuate immediately. The fire is contained to the master closet." "Chief," I said, my voice dead calm, chillingly steady. "My husband is currently located upstairs, and his associate is down in the truck. You might need some specialized equipment to get them loose." A team of firefighters rushed into the house, carrying axes, heavy fire hoses, and insulated rescue tools. They sprinted up the stairs, forcing open the master bedroom door. The room was filled with thick, choking gray smoke. In the corner of the walk-in closet, they found Marcus, his face pale, his eyes wide with a combination of physical agony and absolute humiliation. His hand still completely fused by muscle contraction around the smoking, blackened metal door handle. "Cut the main breaker. Cut the main power grid to the house right now," the rescue captain shouted into his radio. Down in the basement, a firefighter slammed the main electrical lever down. Click. The current stopped. Marcus's muscles instantly collapsed, and he slumped onto the floor, gasping for air. His hands severely blistered and black from the electrical burns. The firefighters quickly deployed their chemical extinguishers, knocking down the flames inside the closet within minutes, preventing the house from burning to the ground. But as they cleared the smoke, the local police department officers stepped into the closet to investigate the source of the fire. Their flashlights illuminated the heavy steel safe, which had been scorched by the flames but remained completely intact. Right beside the safe, scattered across the floor, lay the printed property deeds co-signed by Marcus and Chloe, the bundles of $100 bills that had spilled out during the commotion, and the one-way airline tickets to Paris. Meanwhile, out in the driveway, a second rescue team had forced open the passenger door of the diesel truck. They found Chloe curled up on the seat, weeping hysterically, her hands permanently glued together, with one hand chemically welded directly to her face and lips. She looked completely monstrous, a pathetic, terrifying spectacle of her own greed. The paramedics realized immediately that they couldn't pull her hands apart without tearing her skin to pieces. We need a medical-grade acetone solution and a specialized chemical removal unit. The paramedic shouted, "Get the hazmat response kit from the ambulance." As the emergency crews worked to stabilize Chloe and carry Marcus down the stairs on a medical stretcher, a crowd of dozens of neighbors gathered at the edge of the driveway, their phones raised high, capturing high-definition video of the entire scandalous scene. The elite, high-flying electrical contractor and his young assistant were being exposed in front of the entire community in the most humiliating, public way imaginable. 3 hours later, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a cold, damp silence. The emergency vehicles had departed, their fading sirens leaving the neighborhood in a state of shock. Marcus was sitting in a local hospital bed under armed police guard, his hand wrapped in heavy medical bandages, facing federal indictments for corporate tax embezzlement, commercial asset theft, and reckless endangerment. Chloe was in a separate wing of the hospital, her skin raw and burning from the harsh chemical solvents the doctors had used to slowly dissolve the industrial superglue from her face and hands. Her social standing, her career, and her reputation were completely destroyed. I sat alone at my kitchen table, the house quiet once again, but this time, the silence didn't feel heavy or suffocating. It felt clean. It felt pristine. It felt like absolute freedom. On the table in front of me sat a thick leather folder containing the complete, certified legal files from my corporate defense attorney. Because I had captured high-definition photographs of his secret safe, the embezzled cash logs, the secret property deeds, and Thomas's surveillance videos of his hotel visits with Chloe, his legal defense was entirely non-existent. My attorney had already filed for an emergency asset freeze. Every single penny sitting in our shared corporate accounts, the equity of our home, the assets of the bakery, and even the hidden condo downtown were legally transferred entirely into my name under an unassailable marital fraud petition. Marcus had spent 15 years building a fortune, but in a single Friday night, he had lost his freedom, his money, his business, and his mistress. A month later, a bitter winter wind blew through the front gates of our property. I stood by the front door, watching a pair of moving laborers carry the final remnants of Marcus's personal belongings out to the curb. A sleek, black town car pulled up to the driveway. Marcus's high-priced defense attorney stepped out, carrying a final set of legal settlement documents for my signature. He looked at me with a gaze full of profound, weary respect. "Mrs. Roberts, your husband is willing to sign over the remaining international assets without a trial," the lawyer said, his voice low. "He only asks for one thing. He asks if you could spare a small fraction of the liquidation funds to cover his medical bills for his hand therapy and his legal defense margins. He is completely broke." I took the golden pen from my apron pocket, signed my name at the bottom of the settlement documents with a smooth, unblinking stroke, and slid the file back into his leather briefcase. "You can tell Marcus that reality isn't a corporate contract," I said, my voice holding an absolute unbreakable.com. "In the real world, every action carries a precise, unyielding voltage. He spent years treating our marriage like a dead circuit, thinking he could redirect the current into a secret life without any consequences. He always loved playing with high-voltage components." I looked out at the rainy street, a faint, genuine smile finally touching my lips. He thought he was the master electrician who could manipulate the currents of my life, I whispered as I slowly closed the heavy oak front door. But he forgot the most fundamental rule of his trade. If you play with a live current behind a trusting woman's back, you are eventually going to get completely burned. The heirloom of our marriage was fake, Marcus, but my revenge was absolutely shocking. The heavy lock clicked into place with a profound, final thud. Outside, the lawyer turned and walked away into the freezing rain. Inside, the house was filled with the most beautiful, peaceful silence I had heard in decades. I walked back to my kitchen, took a slow, warm sip of my fresh coffee, and looked out at the horizon. I was finally free. My life was entirely my own, and the traitors were finally gone.